So my before reading strategy was anticipation guides. So what are anticipation guides? So they're kind of a guide that gets students to think about ideas and themes that will be encountered in the unit. So this has students express their opinions about ideas before they read or encounter that text. It also helps students recognize and connect the themes that surface in their learning, and this could be implemented when the class is struggling to have effective classroom discussion. So when would you use an anticipation guide? It's used at the beginning of the unit before you start reading, and it could also be used as review material at the end of a lesson that can reflect on how new material may influence opinions. Because after a student reads the text or the unit, they could have different opinions on if they disagree or agree about a certain statement. So kind of how would I use this? It's a 3-step process in using an anticipation guide. The first step is for the teacher, professor to select statements from the text. And then the second step is you'll have the students respond if they strongly disagree, if they're neutral about it, agree or strongly agree. And you could use that, or you could also use a number system. And in step 3, we'll have the students reflect on the anticipation guides and either write an essay or have a classroom discussion about it. So the first step in the anticipation guides is selecting a statement. So statements should relate to universal themes and dilemmas that can kind of be related to in different topics. They should be phrased in ways that make sense when applied to events in the text. So they should correlate to what the students are going to be reading. And an example that was used in the text that I read was the theme for justice and forgiveness. Some statements that were used were an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind, and the truth heals. Perpetrators should be encouraged to confess their crimes in exchange for lighter sentences. The second step is having the students respond. So teachers will have a worksheet or graphic organizer prepared for the students in advance, and it's supposed to be structured to where students respond if they agree, strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with the statement, and have each student explain why they feel that way. Numerical ranking, like I had stated before, can be used. It could be a 1 through 5 ranking or a 1 through 10, with 1 being they don't agree at all, and either a 10 or a 5, depending on what scale you use, can be you strongly agree with it. So it's kind of used as a way to keep track of thinking as the students read the text, and it can be used as a guide to debating classroom discussions or writing an essay on the unit or the text that they just read. So we could have students reflect on anticipation guides. We can have the students review their anticipation guides after the text, kind of see what they thought before they read, and if there are any changes after they have read the material. Have the students know how the new material may have changed how they think. So if they agree with a certain statement and now after reading the text they disagree with it, we'll have them kind of note that they had that change in thought and kind of how they think now and why reading that article or text had changed the way they thought. And then the reflections can be a written assignment. You could assign an essay on each statement, or you could have a classroom discussion and use those statements as like a guide to start classroom discussion. I know some students may have a problem with not knowing what to talk about in a classroom discussion, so being able to use an anticipation guide to guide their thinking and discussion could be a great way to keep classroom discussion moving. And the statements can be used as writing points, like I said, in an essay or that classroom discussion. So I kind of had made an example. The article that I read was the NCAA tournament, How Math Can Beat the Odds. So kind of a summary of the article, it explained how a mathematician used multiple models, including their own models, the Massey rating model, statistical nuances, logistic regression, Markov chain model, and an empirical Bayes model that were used to kind of help predict a perfect bracket, and just the different aspects that kind of go into it with if a ball will roll into the rim, if it'll roll out, and just kind of how they use these models and luck pretty much in a sense to predict a perfect bracket. So I had created an anticipation guide from this article and some statements that I thought were important in that article that I could have students answer if they disagree with it or agree with it were these 5 statements. And like the first one says, mathematical models can't predict the future, but they can use past behaviors to help inform your predictions. So a student can feel like mathematical models can predict the future, so they might agree with it that mathematical models can't predict the future, but they can use past behaviors to help inform your predictions. So it's just kind of statements like this, and like number 4 states, when it comes to making predictions, we have no idea which way the luck is going to go. So if a student thinks that luck will lean a certain way, they could disagree with it. Kind of just depends on how the student feels. Maybe after reading the article it'll change how they feel about that statement. But I think these anticipation guides are a great way for a student to kind of think about certain aspects that they'll be reading about and kind of see how they feel about it, and then see after reading the article kind of if any of their opinions about these statements have changed. And I really like the anticipation guides because me myself as a student, sometimes in classroom discussions I really don't know topics I could talk about or kind of where to start. So if the classroom is kind of struggling to have a classroom discussion, we could go back to this anticipation guide, and they all had their opinions on these questions, so they could talk about how they felt about it, if they disagreed, agreed, and just kind of why they did it. So that's kind of anticipation guides in a sense, and yeah.